In the dimmest quarter of the old city, where crooked streets wound themselves like tired serpents, and every cobblestone seemed to whisper of forgotten ages, there lived a young painter named Adrian. His lodging was scarcely more than a garret, a place where the wind sang mournful tunes through cracks in the wooden shutters, and the moonlight made a habit of intruding upon his solitude. Adrian was poor, undeniably so. Yet, within his breast, there burned a fire of imagination that no poverty could extinguish. On one rain-soaked evening, as the clock of St. Bartholomew struck its hollow chime, Adrian found himself wandering into a shop of antiques so cluttered and peculiar that it seemed less a merchant's trade than a vault of secrets. The air within smelled of dust, varnish, and the faintest trace of salt, as though the sea itself had breathed upon the relics. Behind piles of cracked porcelain and faded maps lay an object most unassuming. A paintbrush, its handle of darkened wood worn smooth by hands long forgotten, yet the bristles gleamed faintly, as if kissed by some unseen light. Adrian, guided by an instinct he could not explain, reached for it. The shopkeeper, a stooped old man whose eyes glimmered with something between mischief and warning, muttered only, "That brush chooses its master." Adrian left the shop with the brush tucked close to his chest, a curious thrill quickening his pulse. Back in his garret, beneath the dim glow of a single candle, he set the brush to canvas. He chose to paint something humble, a flower, no more than a wild daisy he had once seen growing between the stones of a forgotten alley. The bristles moved with startling ease, as if they knew the path before Adrian's hand did. Then, miracle of miracles, the painted daisy quivered, swelled, and with a breath of color more vivid than nature herself could boast, it lifted from the canvas. The stem bent with living weight. The petals trembled with the hush of midnight air. There, upon the rough table of his lonely room, lay not paint but a flower alive, fragrant, and undeniably real. Adrian staggered back, the candle light flickering wildly as though astonished by the spectacle. His heart raced, disbelief warred with delight. Was this trickery of the senses? Or had the world at last yielded its mysteries to him? The brush lay innocently in his hand, its bristles still warm to the touch. Adrian whispered to himself, scarcely daring to believe. "What wonders have I awakened?" Adrian whispered, and the echo of those words lingered in the shadows of his chamber, as though the walls themselves awaited an answer. Yet no reply came, only the soft rustle of the daisy, alive and breathing, its petals trembling with the draught from the cracked window. By morning, the marvel remained, and so too did the weight of Adrian's secret. He was no stranger to solitude. His life had long been bound within the confines of a garret room in the crooked heart of the old city. The ceiling sloped so low he was often forced to stoop. The walls bore stains of years gone by, and the window looked out upon rooftops that leaned upon one another like weary travelers. Yet amidst this sparseness, his soul was rich with dreams, richer than any nobleman's purse. Adrian's days were simple. A crust of bread bought with coins earned from odd sketches, a jug of water carried up endless flights of stairs, and, when fortune permitted, a candle to chase away the dark. But his heart was a lantern that never dimmed. He painted not for bread alone, but for visions of beauty he longed to share with a world too hurried to notice them. There was but one soul who seemed to understand him, Clara. She had been his companion since childhood, a girl with laughter like silver bells and eyes that carried the calm of summer skies. Clara would often climb the narrow staircase to his attic, her arms burdened with a basket of fruit or a loaf of bread, always insisting she had more than enough to spare. She would sit upon the lone chair, watching Adrian paint with patient admiration, offering him faith when the world offered none. To her, Adrian spoke of his dreams, of paintings so vivid they might sing, of colors so alive they might breathe. But of the brush, of the daisy that still thrived in a chipped glass jar upon his table, he spoke not a word. This secret he clasped to his breast like a treasure both wondrous and perilous, for some gifts seemed too strange, too otherworldly, to be shared even with a friend as dear as Clara. Yet each glance he cast at the flower, each breath he drew of its impossible fragrance, deepened his certainty. His life had been changed forever, and somewhere, beyond the bustle of the waking city, destiny stirred, as if the world itself had turned its gaze toward the young painter in the attic. Yet Adrian, in his innocence, mistook destiny's hand for mere good fortune, for soon his hunger, once a daily adversary, was silenced by the strange power of the brush. One evening, with trembling hands, he painted a loaf of bread, golden, warm, steaming as though fresh from the baker's oven, and to his astonishment, it tumbled from the canvas into his lap. He devoured it greedily, tears in his eyes, for never had bread tasted so sweet. From that moment, necessity drove his hand. When winter's chill crept through the cracks of his roof, he painted a cloak of velvet, rich and heavy, and wrapped himself within its folds. When his shoes split upon the cobblestones, he painted a pair new and shining, stitched as finely as those of a gentleman. With each stroke, his life, once marked by want, grew easier, more adorned, more comfortable. And yet, there came a shadow upon his joy. He noticed it first in the quiet hours of dawn, when his thoughts should have been alight with visions of the future. The once vivid dream of standing in a grand gallery, his paintings admired by a crowd of noble patrons, seemed oddly dim, as though painted in fading watercolors. Later still, when Clara spoke to him of their childhood games and his old ambitions to travel beyond the city walls, Adrian found himself staring blankly, the memories slipping like mist between his fingers. Each creation, wondrous though it was, seemed to steal from him some fragment of his inner world, a dream forgotten here, an ambition blurred there, until the tapestry of his soul, once woven with the threads of limitless imagination, began to show holes. He gazed at the miraculous daisy, still blooming in its jar, and wondered, was this gift a blessing or a curse disguised in beauty? And as he held the brush that glittered faintly even in the gloom, a thought crept upon him, unbidden and unwelcome. What if, in painting the world I desire, I am erasing the very dream that first gave it meaning? So whispered the doubt within Adrian's heart, yet ambition, bright, burning, and irresistible, pressed him onward. For if he were destined to lose fragments of himself, should he not at least lose them in pursuit of greatness? Thus he resolved, with trembling conviction, to paint a masterpiece that would outlive him, a vision of such wonder that generations yet unborn would whisper his name. Not a mere loaf nor cloak, nor jewel, but a city, radiant and whole, a utopia spun from his imagination. Streets of gold bathed in perpetual dawn, towers crowned with blossoms, rivers that glowed as if fed by starlight, and gardens where peace forever reigned. Night after night, in his cramped attic room, he bent over the canvas as though possessed. The brush danced, shimmering in his hand, trailing colors that seemed stolen from dreams themselves. And with each stroke, the impossible city began to unfurl, arches that defied gravity, fountains that sang, windows glowing with the laughter of unseen children. Clara, who visited often, would find him pale, eyes hollow, yet alight with feverish joy, as though he were more spirit than man. But the price grew heavier with every detail he summoned. He forgot the sound of his mother's lullaby, once the comfort of his earliest years. He forgot the first sketch he had ever drawn as a boy upon scraps of paper, the one Clara had praised and kept folded in her locket. Worst of all, he sometimes forgot his own name, staring at the canvas as if the radiant city were not his creation, but his replacement. The painting itself seemed alive, glowing faintly even when the lamps were out, whispering promises of perfection, urging him to add more, to surrender more. And in the hush of one winter's night, when the snow fell soft against the window, Clara clasped his weary hands and whispered, "Adrian, you are losing yourself." Yet he, with a faint smile, replied, "If I lose myself, Clara, let it be within a world more beautiful than this one." Those were Adrian's words, spoken with a smile that trembled at the edge of exhaustion, yet they struck Clara's heart with a chill deeper than the winter, wind that rattled the window panes. In the days that followed, she watched him with growing unease. His once rosy cheeks were now wan, touched with an unnatural pallor, as though the very color of his flesh had been drained into the canvas. His eyes, once bright with mischief and youthful fire, now flickered like fading lanterns, alive only when fixed upon the phantom city that bloomed beneath his brush. He forgot to eat, to sleep, to speak. Worst of all, he began to forget her. "Adrian," she whispered one evening, when he failed to recall the song they had sung together as children beneath the orchard trees. "Do you not remember? The one about the swallow and the moon?" His brow furrowed, lips parted in confusion, as if searching for a sound locked behind a closed door. At last he forced a laugh, brittle as shattered glass. "You mistake me, Clara. My mind is only preoccupied." But Clara was not deceived. She saw his hands tremble when he laid down the brush, as if it clung to him with unseen chains. She saw how the air in the attic thickened whenever he painted, how shadows deepened, how silence seemed to hold its breath. And Adrian, for all his denial, could not escape the gnawing dread within him. Each stroke of the enchanted bristles brought forth wonders beyond imagining. Flowers that bloomed from empty space, jewels that gleamed with living light, music that sang from painted strings. Yet each miracle left him more hollow, as though the brush drank from a well that could never be replenished. Late at night, alone with the luminous canvas, he dared to test his fear. He whispered his mother's name. Nothing came. He searched his mind for the memory of the first day Clara had clasped his hand, muddy from play, and promised they would be friends forever. A haze greeted him, shadows where once had been sunlight. With a cry that shook the rafters, Adrian hurled the brush aside. It clattered to the floor, gleaming faintly in the dim lamplight, patient as a predator. Clara, rushing to him, caught his hands between hers. "Adrian," she pleaded, her eyes shining with unshed tears. "This gift is no gift at all. It is a thief. Can you not see? It is taking you from me piece by piece." Adrian stared at her, stricken. For the first time, he could not deny it. In the stillness of that moment, he realized with a pang that the very dreams that once gave him life were slipping through his fingers, and he, the painter of wonders, was becoming an empty frame. Yet even an empty frame once adorned can dazzle the eyes of the world, and Adrian was soon to discover how intoxicating such adoration could be. Not many days later, spurred by a desperate yearning to prove that his gift had meaning beyond theft, Adrian lifted the brush once more. His hand quivered, but his heart thundered with reckless defiance. On a vast blank canvas, he painted a grand hall, gilded and radiant, filled with rows of unseen faces. Then, with bold strokes, he conjured violins, harps, flutes, and 1,000 strings of invisible choirs. And lo, as the bristles whispered across the canvas, a sound rose from the silence, a note pure and trembling, as if the air itself had learned to sing. Then came another, and another, until the little attic chamber swelled with music richer than any orchestra of flesh and bone. The walls quaked with melody. The floorboards pulsed beneath Clara's feet. She stood in awe, unable to move, her tears falling freely as if her soul had been summoned to dance. The city below soon caught the echo. Windows flung open, doors burst ajar, and men, women, and children alike streamed into the streets, their faces alight with wonder. They followed the sound like pilgrims chasing a miracle, and at last they gathered before Adrian's dwelling, their voices hushed, their spirits lifted. "Who is this painter?" they cried. "Who makes music bloom from mere colors?" And when Adrian emerged, pale and trembling, they raised their hands and hailed him with a reverence once reserved for kings. They pressed coins into his palms, garlands upon his shoulders, praise upon his weary heart. For the first time in his life, he tasted the sweet wine of recognition, and it burned him with rapture. Yet triumph carried its price. For when the last note faded, when the crowd dispersed, and silence crept back into the attic, Adrian turned to Clara with a smile of fragile pride. "Did you hear it?" he whispered. "Did you feel it, Clara? The world finally saw me." But Clara's joy froze upon her lips as she studied his face. His gaze was distant, clouded, searching for something just beyond reach. He frowned as though straining to remember, and at last he asked, in a voice that cracked like glass, "Clara, tell me, what was my mother's face like?" Her heart sank. She realized, with horror and sorrow mingled, that the price of this triumph had been the very memory of the woman who gave him life. Adrian, The boy who once painted dreams could no longer recall the dreamer who first cradled him in her arms. And as the night deepened and the adulation of the city faded to silence, he turned again to the small wooden box where the brush had first lain, as though some hidden answer might be waiting in its shadows. With trembling fingers, he lifted the lining of faded velvet, and beneath it, thin as parchment and yellowed with age, he discovered a folded note. The ink, though faint, bore the elegant strokes of a hand long gone. By the light of a flickering candle, Adrian read aloud, his voice low and uneven, while Clara leaned close, her breath caught in dread. This brush is both gift and grave. It belonged to me, Elias Gray, painter of wonders. Know this: every stroke feeds the canvas with the marrow of the soul. Every beauty summoned devours the dreamer who dares to summon it. I sought to paint the paradise of mankind, but the canvas swallowed me whole. If you hold this brush, abandon your greatest dream, or you too shall be consumed. The candle sputtered, and in that wavering flame, Adrian's face was a study of astonishment and fear. His lips parted, but no words came. Only a shiver ran through him as though the very letters of the note had stolen warmth from his heart. Clara seized his hand. "Adrian, do you hear what it says? You must stop before it is too late." But his eyes, pale with exhaustion, yet glittering with dangerous resolve, did not meet hers. They fixed instead upon the vast, unfinished canvas that loomed in the corner. The radiant city of light he had begun to paint, the utopia that called to him like a siren. A curse, the note had said. A curse that consumed, and yet, was not all greatness born of sacrifice? Was not beauty itself worth the risk of oblivion? Adrian closed the box slowly, almost reverently, as if laying to rest a coffin. If Elias Gray vanished into his masterpiece, he murmured, then perhaps he became one with it. Perhaps to lose oneself is to become eternal. Clara recoiled, her voice breaking. "No, Adrian, listen to me. That brush has already taken your mother's memory. Must it take you too?" But he only placed the brush gently across his palm, his expression serene and fevered all at once, as though fate itself had whispered into his ear. Outside, the city still slept under stars, unaware of the peril that lurked within one painter's room. And within that attic, beneath the dim glow of the candle, Adrian's choice began to harden, between love that pleaded for his life and a dream that demanded his soul. The night pressed heavy upon the rafters, as though the stars themselves leaned close to witness his torment. Adrian clutched the brush, its bristles trembling like a creature alive, glowing faintly with an otherworldly sheen. The unfinished canvas of the radiant city stood before him, towers of light half-born, rivers of gold waiting to flow, a dream suspended between existence and nothingness. He raised the brush high, and for a fleeting moment Clara's heart leapt, believing he meant to dash it against the floor, to end the curse at last. But his hand faltered, hovering in the air as though chained by invisible threads of desire. His eyes fixed on the canvas, and in their fevered depths Clara saw both ruin and rapture. "Adrian," she whispered, her voice breaking under the weight of desperation. "If you finish it, you will vanish into it. Do you not see? The note warned you. I beg you, choose life. Choose us." Her words hung in the room, fragile as glass, yet the brush seemed to pulse in his grip, urging him forward, promising eternity. The city on the canvas shimmered, whispering silently into his mind. Just one more stroke. One more, and all the world shall remember you. His breath came ragged, torn between two hungers, the hunger to be loved and the hunger to be immortal. He staggered toward the canvas, then back again toward the table where the box lay open like a grave awaiting its offering. At last, with a cry that was neither of triumph nor of despair, he struck the floor with the wooden shaft of the brush. The sound cracked through the silence. Clara gasped in relief, yet her joy was short-lived. For though the handle had splintered, the bristles glowed brighter still, refusing to die, as though the curse itself clung to the painter's soul. Adrian fell to his knees, the brush still alive in his hand, his face pale with terror. "It will not let me go," he whispered hoarsely. "Clara, it will never let me go." The attic seemed to shudder with his words. The canvas flickered, alive with light, as if it yearned to swallow him whole. And so the painter of dreams knelt upon the edge of oblivion, torn between love that pleaded and a vision that devoured, with only one choice left before the abyss consumed him. Adrian's trembling hand hovered above the canvas, the cursed bristles glowing as if to mock his weakness. His chest rose and fell with ragged breaths, torn by the weight of the decision. Clara's sob broke the silence, her voice trembling with hope and despair entwined. "Adrian, paint not for the world, but for yourself. For us. Let your last stroke be freedom." Her words pierced through the fever of his ambition, and for the first time he truly saw her, not as a figure blurred by fading memory, but as the steadfast friend whose love had carried him through poverty, obscurity, and now this storm of temptation. A tear rolled down his cheek, warm and human. He raised the brush, and with a hand steadied by resolve, set bristle to canvas. But the stroke was not of golden towers, nor radiant streets. No triumph of immortality, no monument of his name. With a single sweep he painted a sunrise, soft hues of rose and amber spreading across the canvas like the breath of dawn itself. A new beginning, humble and pure. At once the brush shuddered in his hand, cracks splintering its handle like the breaking of ancient chains. A flash of light burst from its bristles, neither cruel nor violent, but gentle as morning light spilling into a darkened room. Adrian staggered back, shielding his eyes. And when he lowered his arm, the brush lay broken in two, lifeless at last. Yet upon the canvas, the sunrise remained, glowing not with sorcery, but with a radiance that seemed born of hope itself. The small attic room was filled with its warmth, banishing shadows, kissing the faded walls with gold. Clara stepped forward, her face awash in its glow, and for a moment, it felt as though the world had been remade. Adrian sank into a chair, exhausted yet free, his heart no longer bound by ambition's cruel chain. "It is done," he whispered, voice heavy with both loss and peace. "Not the city I dreamed, but a dawn I can truly live to see." Clara knelt beside him, her hand closing gently around his. "And that," she said with quiet conviction, "is the greatest masterpiece of all." And in that moment, amid the fading glow of a broken curse, a new light rose, not upon canvas, but within two souls bound by love, by sacrifice, and by the humble beauty of a single sunrise. From that dawn forward, Adrian's life was no longer haunted by shadows of grandeur, nor shackled by the insatiable hunger of a bewitched brush. He returned, with Clara ever at his side, to the quiet rhythm of existence in their humble attic, where the slant of sunlight through the small window became treasure enough, and the scent of drying paint a hymn of honest labor. No longer could he conjure banquets from canvas, nor summon melodies from a painted hall. Yet, with his mortal hand and his mortal brush, he painted once more. Roses in clay pots, children laughing in the square below, the tender curve of Clara's smile caught in a fleeting moment of evening light. These were not miracles of sorcery, but miracles of truth, carved by patience, colored by devotion, and crowned by the dignity of his own heart. Clara watched him, not with pity for what he had lost, but with reverence for what he had gained. She knew as he did that the truest art was not that which deceived the senses, but that which touched the soul. Together they found contentment, not in riches nor applause, but in the small triumphs of days shared honestly, bread earned by effort, laughter freely given, silence filled with peace. Often, when twilight crept across the sky, Adrian would pause before the sunrise he had painted on that fateful day. Its glow had dimmed somewhat, softened by time, yet it still held a warmth that no curse could extinguish. To him it was no longer merely a picture, but a covenant between himself, Clara, and the fragile yet enduring truth that dreams are not meant to imprison, but to guide. And so, with voice gentle and resolute, he would murmur the lesson that had cost him dearly, yet redeemed him wholly. Dreams are meant to be lived, not stolen from a canvas. Thus ended the tale of Adrian, the painter of dreams, not a legend of sorcery and ruin, but a testament to the quiet power of courage, sacrifice, and love.